In chapter 20, we are going to talk about other pronouns. Now, this font that I've chosen here to write other pronouns is a little strange, and the color is a little strange. And this chapter is a little strange because we're just dealing with a bunch of different kinds of pronouns. Now, you already know a few pronouns in Greek, don't you? You know personal pronouns, right? Which in English would be like my or our or he, right? And in Greek, we can have mu and hemon and autos, right? We know personal pronouns in Greek, he, our, my. And you also know relative pronouns, right? Relative pronouns. These are not the pronouns who come and visit you at Christmas, but these are those little bitty connecting words that let you say more about something. This is the man who lives next to me, right? This is the dog which will not stop barking, right? Little bitty connecting words that always have that rough breathing mark and accent that we translate in English as a who, a which, or a that. Now, not a question word who, but a who lives next to me, which will not stop barking, right? So it's these little bitty words that let you have basically like huge adjectives, adjectival type clauses that let you tell more about an antecedent noun. But we have to talk about some other pronouns now. We're going to talk about demonstrative pronouns, reflexive, reciprocal, interrogative, all kinds of fun stuff. And we're going to start with demonstrative pronouns. And demonstrative pronouns come from the Latin word demonstro, which means to point out, right? These are pronouns that point things out. And we have near demonstrative pronouns and we have far demonstrative pronouns. Now, in English, the near demonstrative pronoun will be this or these, and the far would be that or those, right? And so it refers to something that's spatially or conceptually near versus spatially or conceptually far, right? This or these, that or those, to point something out, usually to draw attention to it. Although we do know stylistically some authors can use these without emphasis. It seems that the Gospel of John likes to use them a great deal. Let's first look at the near demonstrative pronoun, the word for this or these, right? Singular this, plural these. Here is the chart right here from the book for the near demonstrative pronouns. You're like, your head's swimming. You're like, what do you mean demonstrative pronouns? We're talking about the words for this or these. This is the Greek words for this or these. That's what we mean by demonstrative pronouns. Houtas, haute, tuta. This, this. Masculine word this, feminine word this, neuter word this. You're like, how would that decline to? Well, let's just do it. Let's imagine we're doing it as a functioning like without any modifier. So it'd be this man, of this man, to or for this man, this man. These men, of these men, to or for these men, these men, right? As opposed to this woman, of this woman, this thing, of this thing, right? Now, how should you memorize this chart? Well, what I would recommend is you memorize houtas, haute, tuta, and then you just study the chart a little bit. You say, okay, I'm adding my regular endings here. I'm adding my endings for phone, logos, teknon, with one minor change that there is no nu there on the neuter singular, so it's not like teknon in that way. Then just like the article, think about the article. You have ha, hey, and ta. Just like the article, the masculine and feminine forms in the genitive pick up a towel, while the nominative forms have a rough breathing mark. So it's very similar to the article in that way. You'll also notice, this is a little trickier. I'm like wondering to myself, should I say this or not? Okay, so in Greek you have A-class vowels like alpha, eta, diphthongs that are A-class, and then you have O-class vowels like omicron, omega, and diphthongs like oo. What you'll notice in this chart is that the stem vowel of the demonstrative pronoun will occasionally shift to be in the same class as the ending. There are a few unexpected changes in this chart. So, for example, you have A-class, 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 A-class. But because in the genitive you have that O-class vowel, the stem shifts to an O-class diphthong. It's a little bit strange. Students are thrown off by that because they're Otherwise, it's regular, like ow, 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 ow. But they're like, why did the diphthong change here? But you'll notice in all the ow forms, the endings are in that same class of vowels, an A-class vowel. And so it's when the ending changes to an O-class vowel, the diphthong in the stem changes to be in the O-class as well. I think that's a little bit tricky. It also goes on with the neuter, right? You've got that shift there to the own, right? Pardon me. You've got the shift going on here, right? It's O class, O class, O class, O class, O class, O class, and then your endings here: O class, O class, O class, O class, O class, O class. But then in the neuter plural, nominative and accusative, you have that ending that's an A class, and then the diphthong shifts to the A class vowel to be there. It's I think, again, you're focusing on recognition. So I wouldn't really, in my mind, I don't think it's necessary to be able to reproduce this chart perfectly. But I do think you need to know, if I say, what's the near demonstrative pronoun? You need to say, oh, that's the Greek words for this and these. And I say, give me the top three. I want you to be able to spit out hutas, haute, tuta. Also, if you run into these other forms, I want you to be able to recognize them. What is the far demonstrative pronoun? You're like, why isn't there a chart for that in the book? Well, because it's so regular, right? It's just ekenos, right? Ekenos means that, right? Or the plural, ekenoi, means those, right? So this is such a regular word, and it basically just sticks on the same endings that autos has. So it'd be the same endings as logos, phone, and teknon, except for the neuter singular is ekena without the nu, right? So that's the only difference. So we're saying it uses the same endings as autos. Ekenos means that, ekenoi means those. This is the far demonstrative pronoun, meaning that or those. And it's so regular, there's no chart of it. So the near demonstrative pronoun, the chart is included because you do have a few little tweaks here and there, and you at least want to be able to refer back to it if you're trying to figure out why a word is spelled slightly differently. Let's talk briefly about the uses of the near demonstrative and far demonstrative pronouns. So these demonstrative pronouns can be used basically like pronouns, pronominally, right? Or they can be used as adjectives. So let's look at an example of them being used by themselves, not modifying any explicit noun. So here it is. Hutas esten, ha huiasmu ha agapetas. So here's your demonstrative pronoun, hutas, right? We just saw that. We go back here. It's just that initial form, hutas, right? This one is my son, the beloved. This one is my beloved son. This man, this person, this one is my beloved son. We have to provide something like, I guess we don't have to provide that, but we can provide the word one if we want. This one, this man, this person. Or we can just say this. This is my beloved son. Hutas, ekenos can also modify explicit nouns. And when they do, they will match case, number, and gender, the noun they're modifying. They're functioning as adjectives. However, it's a little bit strange because when they modify a noun, the noun they modify will have the article, but the form of the demonstrative pronoun will not. You're used to seeing it reversed, like it for other adjectives. Like if we were to say the good words, it would be hoi agathoi lagoi, right? There, the noun would not have the article, and the word modifying it, the adjective, would have the article. But when it comes to the demonstrative pronoun, the regular pattern that you'll always see, unless there's some weird exception, is the noun has the article, but when the demonstrative pronoun is modifying it, it does not have any article there. But it's right next to it, and it matches it case, number, and gender. So these words are faithful and true, right? It's used adjectively. You could have, we could change the sentence. We could take out this hoi lagoi. Let's remove that. And then it would just be, these are faithful and true. Okay? Let's talk about the reflexive pronoun. The reflexive pronoun. This is where you have a verb and you've got a subject, and somehow that activity is reflecting back on the subject. So this is not intensive, like I myself will do it, or he gave it to the Lord himself. It's like I see myself in a mirror, right? There's a verb, and the subject, the action of the verb is reflecting back onto the subject in a reflexive way. So the first person reflexive pronoun, emautu, myself. Second person, seautu, yourself. Third person, heautu, himself, or heautes, herself, heauton, themselves. So just being able, basically this is a vocabulary lesson. You need to be able to recognize these different reflexive pronouns. It's a little tricky in the plural. We added this because students were confused by this. The plural reflexive pronouns are all listed here, the possibilities, masculine, feminine, or neuter. What's confusing is these do triple duty. These same forms can be first person, second person, or third person plural reflexive pronouns. The same forms. You're like, how am I going to know? Because they're reflecting back on an explicit subject. Is the subject we? Is the subject y'all? Is the subject they? That tells you whether to translate it ourselves, yourselves, or themselves. So, for example, we'll look at these initial forms here. They could be translated of ourselves, to or for ourselves, ourselves, or, depending on another sentence, they could be translated of yourselves, to or for yourselves, yourselves, or they could be translated of themselves, to or for themselves, themselves. And of course, there are feminine and neuter forms as well, though in English we don't really distinguish between a themselves that is masculine, feminine, or neuter. Greek is more specific in the particular form, specifying whether it's men giving thanks to themselves, women giving thanks to themselves, or perhaps teknon, neuter entity, children giving things to themselves. Okay, so that's more detail than I really wanted to give on the plural reflexive, but we've had students confused in the past, so I thought I'd try to explain that. Another vocabulary lesson, the reciprocal pronoun. Basically, this is a word that means of one another. You've already learned this in your vocabulary, of one another. The actual lexical form, the dictionary form, is the genitive form because this word never occurs as a subject. Of one another, to or for one another, one another. So here's an example of it. Agapitoi, beloved ones, right? Translated by the NIV here, I think, dear friends. Let us love. This is a hortatory subjunctive. You do not know that yet, but it's translated let us love. And then there's your direct object, allelus, accusative, plural, because it's the direct object, so it's accusative. Beloved ones, let us love, allelus. Let us love one another, the reciprocal pronoun. Now the interrogative pronoun, right? I just told you, we're just kind of like sweeping up all the pronouns in the dustbin and presenting them to you. This is the question words in Greek. And it might be helpful to look at some examples of these first, right? You'll notice I'm highlighting here these little bitty question words. And they're basically who, or of whom, or whose, to or for whom, or to or for which in this case, or whom. And it's a little confusing in English because we don't use whom as much anymore, but basically whom is the object. So if here the tina is not doing the zeteta. In other words, someone else is seeking, you are seeking whom, so it's the object. Whom is the object form of the question word as opposed to the subject form. Here the tis is the subject of the verb. So it might be helpful just to sort of read through these and get a sense for how they function. One way you know these are question words is that the Greek sentences always end with a question mark, right? That helps you know it's a question word. So tis estin hutas. Who is this? Tinas huias estin. Literally, son of whom is, question mark. Whose son is he? Tinas is of whom or whose. Tini gar apen pateton angelon. For to which of the angels did he ever say? Tini, to which? Or in some contexts, we would translate that to whom. Tina zetete. Whom are you seeking, or whom do you seek? Now, if you're shaky, if you're from the southeastern United States like me, and you're shaky on who and whom, colloquially, these are used interchangeably in informal English, so don't worry about it too much. So you'll notice here we have the singular forms and the plural forms, right? And I want you to notice that we have a masculine/feminine form, and then we have a neuter form. So how would these be translated? Who, whose, to or for whom. Plural the same. Who, whose, to or for whom. For the neuter, it would be like what, of what, to or for what. The plural is the same. What, of what, to or for what. Because in English, we don't have a plural word for who or a plural word for what. If I say, hey, who did it? You don't know if I mean who singular or who a group of people. But in Greek, so the teacher comes in the room and thinks one person did it. Tis, who did this? Or they could say, Tines, who did this? It'd be which group of kids did this, right? Greek is... Now, we can communicate the same thing. We just have to add more words. Which group of you nincompoops did this to my, board? I'm imagining like an elementary school teacher who comes in and the students have poured, chocolate pudding all over the desk or something like that. So, how do we learn this? Well, again, make sure you know where the chart is with the masculine and feminine and the neuter. Make sure you understand what you're memorizing. I recommend that you memorize tis, ti, tinas, right? Tis, ti, tinas. Why are you doing that? Because these follow third declension endings, so we have to get that teen stem that the rest of the word builds off of. And then you'll notice it's just third declension endings. Yoda, alpha, s, on, sin, os. Or for the neuter, we have the os, the yoda, the alpha, on, sin, alpha. So if you go back and look at your masculine/feminine and neuter third declension endings, you'll see that we're using them in that way here. Now, perhaps in class one semester, I might ask students to write out all of these. I say, I want you to be able to give me the masculine and feminine interrogative pronouns. But as a strategy for learning these, personally, efficiently, I would recommend that you memorize those initial 3 forms and then take some time to see how other forms can be hooked on those initial forms, how you can recognize them. Maybe, again, blow up the chart, photocopy it, mix them out of order, and then play around with them and see if you can recognize them based on those initial 3 forms. I want you to notice how every single one of these forms has an acute accent over the initial iota. As you look through the whole chart, you see that. I tell students, think about that acute accent like the bottom of a question mark. You say, well, why should I really pay attention to that? You should pay attention to that because if the accent is anywhere else or there's not an accent, then it's a different pronoun, right? Look at this chart. This is the indefinite pronoun. And if you were to compare them side by side, you'd say the words are spelled exactly the same. The only difference is these do not have an acute accent over the initial iota. They either have no accent or they have an accent somewhere else. If we put an accent over the initial iota, that would make these the question words. Who, what, whose. But that is not what we have. Instead, we have the indefinite pronoun. You're like, this is playing with my mind right here. How would you translate the indefinite pronoun? Someone, of someone, to or for someone. Someone as the direct object. Certain ones, of certain ones, to or for certain ones. Certain ones as the direct object. Something or anything. Of something, to or for something. Something. Some things, of some things, to or for some things. Some things. And these can also modify words, right? Tis can mean anyone, someone, anyone. It can also, tis anthropos, a certain man. A certain man lived in a village, blah, 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 blah. So these can be used as modifiers, or they can be used by themselves. You're like, how am I going to keep those straight? You're going to keep those straight because if there is an acute accent over the initial iota, that's the question word who or what. If there is not, that's the word someone or anyone. That's the interrogative pronoun. It will also help you because when the interrogative pronoun is used, guess what? You have question marks at the end of the sentences, so you know that they are questions. You're going to keep them straight. I believe in you. We also introduce in this chapter, this is the last concept, the pronominal adjective, right? So if I want to say my word, I could say ha logos mu. I want to say my child, I say ta teknon mu. I want to say my wife, I say he gune mu. There is only one form of the genitive pronoun, possessive, that I can use. It never changes. It doesn't matter if I'm describing a masculine thing, a neuter thing, a feminine thing, a plural thing. My words will be hoi la goi mu. Same thing. There is one form of that, right? Just from the paradigm. Maybe you remember. I know it's a lot in your head right now, but ego, mu, moi, me, right? That's the form. Whether I'm doesn't matter, right? That's it. Doesn't change. But there's another way to say this with an adjective. It's called a pronomial adjective because it overlaps in function with the personal pronoun here in terms of what it communicates. But there's the adjective, emos, and this is an adjective. It's like the adjective agathos or kalos or paniros, so it changes spelling based on what it modifies. So my wife would be he eme gune, right, with the feminine ending. My child, ta eman, let's see if we can write this a little clearly, ta eman technon, change in spelling to match case number and gender, the noun it's modifying. Or my word, ha emas logos, right? It is an adjective, so it changes spelling to match the word it modifies. There are several of these in Greek. I think this is the only one you learned in your vocabulary list last time, but there's also a pronomial adjective, humeteros, which means your, like your plural, or hemeteros, which means our plural, right? So there's another second person singular. Sos means your singular, right? Overlapping with the genitive pronoun su. So these are all pronomial adjectives that function like to communicate the same thing that a genitive possessive pronoun would. Pronomial adjectives. They're adjectives. Someone's asking an important question in their heart. They're saying, why would someone do this when you could just use the possessive pronoun? Well, languages often have 2, 3, or more ways to say the same things. We like stylistic variation. But the question is there any nuance of different meaning here? And perhaps the use of the pronomial adjective like emos, perhaps, I think it's likely, it has a perhaps slightly greater emphatic purpose. So like we might say in English, that's probably an over-translation, or my own, maybe it would be better. My own. This is my own book, right? There's a little, when you say this is my book, this is my own book, there's a little bit more intensity or emphasis that's conveyed by including the word own. And again, I feel hesitant to say that we're not going to translate it that way with the word own, but it's just an example of how we can include a little bit more intensity or emphasis or nuance with a slight change in the way we speak of possession.